Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Myself, Dr. Itika Singh, Associate Professor in Physiology. Today, I'll be giving you a small introductory lecture about physiology. I have authored 3 books of physiology: Textbook of Physiology for medical students, Fundamentals of Medical Physiology, and Essence of Physiology for nursing. I had also contributed a chapter on physiology of body temperature regulation in Textbook of Medical Physiology. Now, let us understand what is physiology. Physiology, it is a branch of biology, and it is basically concerned with the functioning and mechanisms in the living beings. And there is understanding of how the organisms, several organ systems in the body, organs, tissues, cells, and biomolecules, they perform several chemical and physical functions in human bodies. So we'll be discussing about the syllabus in physiology first. Systems in physiology include journal physiology, hematology, nerve muscle physiology, gastrointestinal physiology, cardiovascular system, respiratory physiology, renal physiology, endocrine physiology, reproductive physiology, neurophysiology, that includes nervous system and special senses, sense of taste, sense of smell, hearing, and vision. Integrated physiology, it includes your brain death, thermoregulation, physiology of meditation, sedentary lifestyle, and ATCOM, attitude, ethics, and communication. Now, all these topics, they have been duly covered in Textbook of Physiology for Medical Student, the book which has been authored by me. Okay, so this is the book. It comes in 2 volumes, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Now, Volume 1 has some new topics: deep sea diving, muscular dystrophy, apoptosis, autonomic function test that you can see, and ATCOM, space physiology, brain death, COVID-19, infertility, IVF, sedentary lifestyle. They have been covered in Volume 2. Now, these are the key highlights of the book. ATCOM, it has not been covered in any of the physiology textbooks. It's in our book. It has multiple choice questions at the end of each section. Clinical cases, they have been given at the end of each chapter. Sample problems, clinical questions with hints and answers to all. And the entire text, it has been updated as per the latest CBME based curriculum. The book is complemented with several images and illustrations like the histology, ultrasound scans, radiographs, MRI scans, echocardiograms, etc. And the questions that have been recently asked in the examination, they have been given at the end of each chapter. Now, this is the representation, and it shows radiographs, echocardiogram, MRI scan. Okay. This is a thyroid scan in normal people, hypothyroid and hyperthyroid patients. And all the questions that have been given at the end of chapter, these are as per the CBME based pattern. So this is the pattern. Here you can see the clinical cases, clinical question, physiological basis, compare and contrast questions, reasoning based question, short notes on applied aspect, etc. Early clinical exposure is also there in the book. That forms a bridge between the preclinical and the clinical departments. Multiple choice questions as per the competencies laid by CBME, NMC. Again, about the syllabus. General physiology will be covering cellular physiology, transport mechanisms, homeostasis, body fluids, genesis of membrane potential, apoptosis in general physiology. And at the end, MCQs have been given. We'll also discuss MCQs clinical cases. Hematology will be covering composition functions of blood, plasma proteins, hemoglobin, red blood cells, anemias, jaundice, white blood cells, platelets, hemostasis, blood grouping, transfusion, immunity. In nerve muscle physiology, we'll be discussing about the physiology of nerve, classification properties of nerve fibers, nerve injuries, regeneration, neuromuscular junction, myasthenia gravis, and about the muscle physiology, skeletal muscle, smooth muscle. Okay? At the end of each section, we'll be discussing multiple choice questions and clinical cases. Now about the gastrointestinal physiology, we'll be discussing about the structure and function of the system, gastrointestinal secretion, gut motility, nutrition, digestion absorption, gut peptides, liver and gallbladder, gastric function tests, pancreatic function tests, liver function tests, and disorders and applied aspect in GIT. Cardiovascular system, functional anatomy of human heart, cardiac impulse, cardiac cycle, ECG, cardiovascular regulatory mechanisms, cardiac output, blood pressure and its regulation, regional circulation, shock, syncope, heart failure, hemodynamics. Respiratory physiology, mechanics of respiration, gas transport, high altitude physiology, regulation of respiration, deep sea diving, disorders of respiration, artificial respiration. Renal physiology, mechanism of urine formation, renal regulation of fluid and electrolyte along with the acid-base balance, physiology of micturition, diuresis, renal function tests, dialysis, renal transplantation. Endocrine physiology, general principles of endocrinology, pituitary gland, thyroid gland, calcium homeostasis, calcitropic hormones, adrenal gland, pancreatic hormones. We'll be discussing these topics. Reproductive physiology, puberty, male and female reproductive system, pregnancy, parturition, lactation, contraception, infertility, IVF, and neurophysiology will include synapse, cerebral cortex, motor tracts, somatosensory system, spinal cord, reflexes, posture regulating mechanisms, cerebellum, basal ganglia, hypothalamus and thalamus, EEG, sleep, high functions that will include your memory, learning, speech, limbic system, special sense, sense of taste, sense of smell, physiology of hearing, physiology of vision. Integrated physiology, skin and thermoregulation, exercise physiology, sedentary lifestyle, meditation, yoga nidra, aging, physiology of infancy, physiology of stress, COVID-19, space physiology, etc. And ATCOM, that stands for Attitude, Ethics and Communication, will be having 5 modules. What does it mean to be a doctor? What does it mean to be a patient? Doctor-patient relationship, Foundation of Communication Part 1, and cadaver as a first teacher. Now in physiology, we perform several academic activities in form of small group discussion, tutorials, practicals, theory lectures, several theory tests, quiz, seminars, and early clinical exposure sessions are given to the students. Now this is the basic mark scheme. We have 2 papers, paper A and paper B, each carrying 100 marks. Again, paper A or paper B, these are subdivided into part 1 and part 2, each carrying 50 marks. So it will include MCQs, clinical case based question or structured question, short notes and applied aspect or early clinical exposure compare contrast questions, and reasoning based question. Now there is always a way to make the things interesting and easier for the students. So in our department, we always conduct quiz for the students. These are the few pictures showing the physiology quiz that have been conducted in the department. And it's highly motivating for the students. Seminars, they form an important part for understanding the concepts. Students showing the seminar on cardiovascular system, renal physiology seminar, early clinical exposure sessions. We had conducted a visit to the blood bank so that students, they can be exposed to the blood collection room, component areas, and how the blood grouping and cross matching are done. They can understand that. Neurophysiology has a separate place in physiology because several tests, these are conducted in our lab by physiologists. EEG, quantitative EEG analysis, nerve conduction velocities, EMG, brainstem auditory evoked potential, visual evoked potential. So there is always a clinical correlation. First of all, we read physiology and we can correlate it clinically. So this is EEG, NCV, for radial nerve, median nerve, tibial nerve, VEP, brainstem auditory evoked potential, EMG. These are done in physiology. So thank you so much. From next lecture, we'll be starting with the important topics in physiology. Thank you.